This is John Strohmeyer, and we're coming to you live from Clio Cloud Conference 2022 in Nashville, Tennessee. We have a lot of great interviews this week. Looking forward to sharing them with you. We're kicking off Clio Cloud Conference Week with a pre-recorded interview we did with Joshua Lenon. We got early access to the Legal Trends Report. This is the 7th year that Clio has released this report. If you've read it before, you know it is a great sign of things to come, and the 2022 report is no different. Josh and I are going to get into some of the deeper findings of what lawyers should be taking about how they run their practice, as well as how they adapt to not only their employees, but their clients. Remember, when we think about the three-legged stool of how we deliver for our clients, we're focusing on you, the practice owner, your employees, and your clients. We want to make sure we're taking care of all three, and Josh and I get into how we can take care of all three of us in this interview. Joshua Lenon, it is great to have you back here on the 5-Star Counsel podcast.
It is always a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me, John.
So today we are talking about Clio's 2022 Legal Trends Report. I've gotten a quick advanced look at it, starting with the top line. I mean, really, the headline that y'all put on there was grappling with the work-life dynamics. What has happened over the last 2 years? As we think about service, well, it's not just service to our clients. It's also how do we take care of the people who work for us? Because if it doesn't work for everybody, it's not going to work for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Josh, where do we even begin with this year's Legal Trends reports on work-life dynamics?
So I think one of the more interesting things that Clio is able to provide is really a data-driven insight into what's happening out there. And that became especially true in 2020 when we were providing monthly updates on how the pandemic was impacting the practice of law. And now we're able to turn that same data set of hundreds of thousands of contributing legal professionals into insight into, as people begin to move past the pandemic, what's going to be the next stage of practicing law. And so there are a couple of places where that data really comes forward. The first of which is that we're able to take a look at not just how people work, but also where and when. So in Clio, we track different metrics of the law firm, such as their billable hourly rates, how much they bill per month, how much they collect per month. But we're also able to see certain usage metrics that we haven't really published before until this date, like what hours of the day are people using Clio to help manage their practice? And how does that compare to hours of other professional service industries? Are lawyers working more? Are they working less? Are they working more days or less days? And how does that line up with some of the preferences that lawyers have for their days? And so it led to some really interesting insights where we found that on a normalized hourly basis, right? So, and what I mean by that is looking at the person's time zone and comparing that to the normal business day, and then I'm throwing air quotes around normal there. When do lawyers work in comparison to that? And what we found, both via survey data and app data, is that lawyers tend to start earlier. So rather than the 9 to 5 that is kind of idealized, we see a lot of lawyers starting at 7, around 20% of our normalized hours start around 7 a.m. their local time. And we see at the end of the day, there's around 20% working past 6 p.m. And so lawyers are working either earlier in the day or later in the day than comparative professional services. And we went out and we surveyed a bunch of those. We also see that lawyers are working more days than they choose to. And so we asked lawyers, what days do you want to work versus what days are you actually working? And what we found is there was a heavy preference to not work on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And
Sure.
unfortunately,
or Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday.
Yeah, those seem to be like viewed as, yeah, I should be working those days. But Friday, Saturday, and Sundays, only 45% of lawyers said they really wanted to be working like all day Fridays, and 80% of lawyers told us that they are. Only 10% wanted to work Saturday, 42% are telling us that they are. And 7% said that they were okay working Sundays, but 32% of lawyers tell us that they actually are. And this lines up with some earlier legal trends data where we found that lawyers feel like they need to work extra hours to catch up. And that's one of the, I think, the issues that is impacting the legal profession is the work just doesn't stop. And oftentimes we as lawyers aren't in control of the deadlines. And so we have to work towards the deadlines rather than towards a balance. And that's why 76% of lawyers that we surveyed told us that they would prefer to choose which hours of the day that they work in order to accommodate the rest of their lives around that. There are going to be some days when starting at 7 is just fine, and working past 6 is okay. And there are going to be some days when it's not. And being able to choose those hours is something that is highly preferred by lawyers. And I think law firms that lean into kind of a more self-managed workday are going to be the ones that will have success in hiring the best staff out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, just picking up on the last thing you said, the self-managed. Previous guest, Jody Thompson, talked to us about the results-only work environment. The thought of, we only care about results, it's not about the efforts. So if we only care about the results, how do we make sure we get those results? Mm-hmm. Now, adapting myself to a lot of what you dropped in there. I am in the 80% that is not working at 7 a.m., but I'm a night owl, so I wake up later. I prefer to get my run in before I start my day. So I'm generally not logging in really until 8:30 or closer to 9, but I'm going to be the person who is at 6 o'clock. I'm starting to wind down for the day. There are a couple days a week where I'm going to work until 8, but I know that I'm going to do that to compress those days to, generally for me, Mondays and Tuesdays, so that I am done and it's scheduled on my calendar. Thursday is date night, at 6:30.
Yeah.
There's nothing else that's going on my calendar. And it's not officially a thing, but I just end up having so many kind of Friday afternoon fun things. The quarter just ended for us, so as a team, we are doing something tomorrow afternoon, starting at 3 and then going to dinner.
That sounds great.
And then, I pretty much do not work outside of wake up on Saturdays, check my email to make sure there are no fires. And then I use Sunday afternoon for a couple hours to kind of wrap up the week, make sure I know what's coming so I'm not walking just blindly in.
Yeah.
On Monday morning.
And that absolutely is a great way to manage your time. But what makes that possible?
Yeah, the way I've seen it is, it helps that I'm the one in charge of my practice. So I could say, this is fine. Here I am sitting in my house right now, barefoot in shorts, and you're kind of enjoying the same thing. You're working from, Columbia, or you're working from somewhere, a location undisclosed in Missouri.
I'm actually visiting family in Missouri and working at the same time. Right. Yeah.
Right. And again, the results are what Clio cares about, not your location, not you being physically located in Vancouver.
Yes. Yeah.
They've trusted you. They have trusted you to get your job done.
That's absolutely the case. And that lines up with another, I think, startling fact from this year's report. And that's nearly 1 in 5 lawyers has changed jobs in the last year. And when surveyed about why they changed jobs, work-life balance was one of the top cited statistics. 37% of lawyers who changed jobs said they did so for work-life balance. It was tied with the other top, which is better compensation. And when you think about it, really those two things go together, right? I might be willing to accept a little bit less for a better work-life balance. Or if I'm not going to have work-life balance, I better be paid for it, right? That I'm giving up this time with my family, I'm giving up time with my hobbies. And so, I better be making bank. And so we're seeing that for firm managers, having a work-life balance approach is going to be crucial in maintaining having experienced employees who are part of your team and willing to work towards the good of the firm and not just up and leave because they can't find their own personal good at that same time.
Right. It's a matter of making sure you as a firm know if whichever decision you're going with.
Hmm.
Personally, I'm looking for the work-life balance. We are not charging them as much because we're not working, we're not grinding out 12 hours a day,
Yeah.
6 days a week, because we want to go do other things with our time. But
Hmm.
knowing we've made that decision, it affects a lot of things downstream, and particularly the people who are going to want to come here. We can kind of get a faster read on them
Yeah.
if they're looking for a high-powered, high-profile. I'm going to be the fanciest lawyer around.
Hmm.
We're going to do some fancy work. We've got some impressive clients, and yet you're not going to see your name in lights. You're not going to be able to talk about who your clients are here because of the work we do. And it is all a trade-off so that we can offer the balance, the particular balance of benefits and work that we do here. So,
Yeah, your billable
I'd
hourly
agree.
targets, right, don't necessarily then have to be 2,200 hours a year,
No,
right?
no. No.
Yeah.
It's right. As a flat fee firm, our billable hour targets are in fact zero,
Zero. Yeah. See?
which is great.
And that
So,
gives you that flexibility.
right. And like the other thing that came out of it,
Hmm.
and the thing I wanted to see is, it looked like roughly 50% of lawyers, or 49% actually,
Hmm.
uh, had a preference for working from home. So even if
Yes.
it was you're going to bill 12 hours a day, I would imagine that the 20% that wants balance, the 20% that wants to work more and get paid more, it probably is evenly divided among those.
So we didn't do a pivot to say, do the lawyers who work from home choose salary or work-life balance more? And that's actually an interesting question. I should go back and research. Um,
Yeah.
but one of the things we did see is that um, what we assume is office use has dropped dramatically since 2020, and has now kind of shifted itself into four categories of office use. And
Really?
we describe those in the report as only office, mostly office, a hybrid approach, and then mostly digital. And how we came about with this is we took a look at numbers of accounts logging into the same IP address. So
Okay.
Clio, and this is disclosed in our privacy policy, I'm not giving anything away here, but does take a look at IP addresses as a security feature. So it can be used as a proxy for location, roughly, right? It might tell us the state, maybe a metropolitan area. And what we have found is in certain like hacking attempts in the greater community, one of the things that services detect is our IP addresses jumping between regions, nations, that kind of thing. And so if John logs in on Monday in California, and then like 3 hours later logs in Russia, that's a red flag. And that's why
Right.
we monitor those things. But it also can give us some insight into how people are working. So we made an assumption: any IP address with three or more users logging in, we felt it's a shared workspace, probably an office.
Right.
And from that, we were able to see what was the percentage of firms that are using a collective workspace or an office. How did that drop in 2020 when lockdowns were happening? And has it recovered? And that last one's really important. It never has come back to the 2019 levels that we have records of. And so law has become a much more distributed workforce. And in fact, in my legal trends presentation at Clio Con, I actually now describe the law firm as a state of mind and not a place. Who do I work for? Who do I work with? That's what a law firm is now. And it's always been that way with partnership law, but now we're starting to see it in geography as well. So and then once you consider the fact now that law firms are distributed by design, at least for a large portion of them, what does that mean in terms of operation choices for a law firm? And so one of the things we began researching was who is using cloud-based software, and of the lawyers in those firms, how do they feel their practices are doing? And we discovered actually a really startling difference between firms that are using cloud-based legal practice management, which may or may not include Clio. Our surveys are not limited to Clio users, right? So it's any firm using Clio or a competitor. versus firms that were not. And what we found is there was a 33% difference in satisfaction amongst employees between those that work in a cloud-based firm and those that are not. And yeah, and we think that means that firms that are organizing themselves via cloud software are better able to support those lawyers who want to pick and choose their own hours and pick and choose whether or not they work from home. And because of that, again, with all of this kind of great migration, great resignation, whatever buzzword you want to have for people changing jobs, we think the firms that are moving cloud first are the early adopters who are going to be attracting a greater market share of the best qualified lawyers out there, the ones that are results driven. And that in turn will lead to the best selection of clients who will be leaning into those results-driven law firms. In fact, we see firms that are using cloud-based legal practice management software also describe their clients as being more satisfied than those firms who are not using cloud-based legal practice management software. And that was gratifying, to be honest, right? Because that's what we build.
Yeah.
But it's our customers, our competitors, or people using our competitors, and people who are using nothing. And the ones who are using the type of service that we offer are describing themselves as better law firms. And there's actually even a lot more stats below that in terms of compensation. Cloud-based law firms, lawyers describe themselves as better compensated. They describe themselves as having better mental health. And they describe themselves as having higher employee and satisfaction and compensation. So whether it's they're getting paid better or that work-life balance is being seen as its own compensable benefit. I think I just made up a word, but
Right.
yeah, they're happier in these firms, and so I think we're seeing the start of a curve in how law firms are going to exist in the future. And that, I think, is the big headline of the 2022 Legal Trends Report. We've talked about this kind of evolution and migration and how law firms are going to work. I think this year is the year we see it and begin describing it.
So, Josh, couple kind of broad questions. As you looked
Mm-hmm.
at it, obviously you're giving a talk on this at
Yeah.
Clio, so you get to pick out what you want to talk about. But just
Mm-hmm.
from your own personal, read of this, what really surprised you coming out of this report?
So there were two things that surprised me. The first of which are the financial KPIs that we always track. We've seen our biggest change to date in utilization rates, 6% year over year growth. And that tells me that lawyers are starting to delegate more, either to technology services or to other professionals within their law firms. Lawyers are spending more time being lawyers and less time being business managers. So that's headline one. The headline two, and this is the one that I think surprised me and people might be sleeping on, is we did a survey of clients and lawyers on how they prefer to pay. So we asked lawyers, how do you think your clients prefer to pay? We asked clients, how do they prefer to pay? And we went incredibly broad on the types of payment options that are available. Litigation financing, bartering, legal insurance, things that aren't part of the normal offerings that most law firms think about, but clients might. And what we found is there is a strong preference for flat fees, obviously, but also just having a good budget and legal insurance were things that were really high up there. Then when we asked those same law firms that we surveyed, what payment options are they providing? Not what do they think clients prefer, but what are they providing? The scope was much narrower. And there's hourly, there's flat fee. For those types of practice areas that can do it, there was contingency fee billing. And the payment options were really very narrow. And this actually spoke to me in terms of legal tech as something that we as a legal tech provider need to lean into. If we are not making it easy for these firms to adapt increasingly varied and flexible payment methods, are we then excluding potential client bases from the law firms that we are supporting? Does that make sense?
It does. And so, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess to put it this way, I, as the law firm owner, am happy to take checks and credit cards of pretty much
Yeah.
anything that'll go through the system.
Mhm.
But one of the things that I'm not going to take for kind of a variety of reasons, but to kind of put a fine point on it, I don't want to take crypto. One, because there's no kind of clear guidance from the state bar on it. So
Yeah.
look, the things that I want to worry about and the risks I want to take, getting in trouble with the bar on payments and what happens if they pay me in 45 satoshis and the US cash value on that triples. Do I have to give something back, or vice
Yeah.
versa? If it drops by half, do I get to go ask for more?
Hmm.
That sort of thing. I, as the business owner, I am knowingly narrowing the funds I will take because I'm not going to take crypto. Can you tell me a little bit more about what, when you say the narrowed options, what options are you seeing that should, law firm owners should at least be considering if, there aren't other kind of practical reasons not to have them?
Yeah. And first, as an aside, if you ever do get a serious offer of crypto, go back and take a look at the talk in 2017 that I did with Amy Tahar on how law firms should be handling cryptocurrencies in a variety of different capacities, one of which was as payment for fees, another of which was how do you hold them in escrow? And I've got you covered there.
Yeah. Good.
But it's on YouTube. We can find it for you.
Yep.
But in terms of what law firms should be considering, and so back in our 2020 legal trends report, we discovered that only half of law firms had the capabilities to offer payment plans. And so we just built payment plan features into Clio. And that's an example of noticing um, a lack of market offering despite a desire from clients. An overwhelming majority of clients are saying a payment plan is definitely a preferred method. So what we're also seeing is that rather than payment plans, oftentimes a monthly fixed fee is something that's been a very desired feature, especially in litigation. So it's not how many hours do you work, but that I have you working for this month for X number of dollars. And month one, the hours might be a little higher. Month two, it might be a little lower. But the predictable payment throughout the entirety of the litigation is something that's well valued. It's almost like a subscription, but at a matter level. I will pay
Right.
you for this matter.
Right. And I
You know,
mean, as an estate planner, my firm just turned 4.5. We've had clients on various forms of subscription pretty
mm-hmm,
much since I started this firm, and it's something there that's for our clients. It makes it easier. They have the security of knowing, some months they may win the bet, some other months I may win
mm-hmm.
the bet, but overall it works out. They know that they're not going to get dinged with a surprise bill. They're
Yes.
welcome to call me almost whenever because I do want to talk to them, because if I'm around more often, they know I can solve those issues for them before it gets further down the line and then they're calling and saying, "How do we clean the mess up?"
You provide value, right? And
Exactly.
that provision of value is not necessarily something that every tool supports. Is it was my takeaway from
Right.
this section, and so I'm going to be looking internally at Clio and figuring out how do we speed up development of flexibility when it comes to payment options. An example of that might be making sure that a firm can operate in multiple currencies very easily, right? If you
Right.
are a firm that is helping families immigrate and having to deal with currency exchanges, right? Can we make it easier for your clients by them being billed in their original jurisdiction's currency, right? And so their banking system will recognize the invoice. They don't have to worry about exchanging funds. How do we make that easier for you? Or if you are going to be handling cryptocurrency, how do we help you record both the wallet transactions and the exchange transactions when you convert that back into fiat currency for your own banking needs? Does your tool support and record that in such a way that if there is a fee dispute, or if part of it is being held in trust as an advanced fee deposit, that you have the adequate documentation throughout. That's something that a lot of lawyers have had to try and figure out on their own. And I think it's time for Clio to step up and help with that.
Excellent. Josh, I think this is a great place to cut off for right now. We're talking to a lot of other folks and probably you again during ClioCon next week. But
Mhm.
in the meantime, where can people find you on the internet?
So they can find me obviously at Clio.com, but I'm also incredibly active on Twitter at Joshua Lenon. That's Lenon. And you'll definitely see my Twitter feed throughout ClioCon and continuing to discuss the legal trends report throughout the year. It's something that is now an annual workflow at Clio. We don't stop just for the conference, but immediately begin on the next one, researching the numbers and trying to really find better ways to help lawyers inform themselves on where the legal industry is going.
Excellent. Josh, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening. You can find more info on us and get your free white paper on client service at 5starcounsel.com. You can get in touch with me at john@5starcounsel.com. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe wherever fine podcasts are found and leave us a review wherever you can.